The successful content creator advises the novice freelancer to choose a niche and stick with it. As I scan my notebook of titles for potential videos and wonder what that niche might be, a picture begins to take shape. Certainly most niches are simple. Personal training, chocolate, Zamboni driving, the history of spandex. Simple, simple, simple. Reality rarely is, and my niche definitely isn't. So what is my niche? We might call it my fascination for everything, or not merely the scope and breadth of everything, though sometimes it is, but the virus infecting society and culture, the echo chambers that menace the most innocuous of conversations, that haunt the shadows of our minds. And no, echo chambers have nothing to do with cheese, not dairy, nor photography, nor geriatric euphemisms. Echo chambers, however, like cheese, are found everywhere in society, but not in the way that tastes pleasing. More like all of the sensations after having eaten too much, followed by a failure to deal with the ensuing flatulence, perpetrating a holocaust, or worse, an angry snuggle buddy. So by now you must be wondering, what are echo chambers? Because it's a term that has been redefined in the last few years, one of many, to hide essential truths so that, in being divided, your mind and your energies might be conquered. But isn't it self-explanatory? Well, it should be. One voice bouncing off a wall of people, the wall mindlessly echoing the same. In an echo chamber, dissent is unforgivable, critiques denounced without thought or proper research, insults hurled. Sometimes with violence ensuing, because one person feels they can't accept that another person or group just doesn't see the world in the same way. That it is a war, and it must be won at all costs and by any means necessary, and that every debate is an opportunity to force someone else to agree with me. This has nothing to do with whether or not you prefer dark chocolate or white chocolate. Those are preferences. Echo chambers are a total disregard for thought, the best of which quietly shuts others out, but those of a darker nature, those that are possessed with a spirit of imp unity, and almost as often a total disregard for others, mechanized by fear and ignorance, made up of self-righteous projection of one's own self-image onto others, whom they would as much prefer to convert as befriend, and whom they would prefer to stone as convert, eager to punish because they disagree, while they are themselves the biggest abusers. They don't care about you until they require validation, and only for the feeling of their own self-worth, demanding that you seek their validation and vilify you when there is no complicity. The sides and their gatekeepers are only illusions to divide, keeping your mind on the enemy and off of them. It's a party, and you're not invited. You are the errand boys and girls who are always promised a seat at the table, but are always kept busy. And if you think your side of the aisle is without such a papier-mâché monolith, then I would recommend you find yourself a good optometrist. Now that we have contemplated what an echo chamber is, how then are they created? And how is their sanctity guarded? Who can you think of that zealously guards an echo chamber? Maybe you're right. Maybe you're not. Because that could actually be the message of a gatekeeper in your own echo chamber. The echo chamber is a cheap cloth made of common threads. Rather than accept accountability for their own beliefs, thoughts, and emotions, The echo chamber's thralls choose to blame someone else instead. It's the easiest thing to blame others for what you do yourself. Do you see how insidiously these things work? Creating sides where they are not, to pit one against the other. As every religion is not without prophets, every echo chamber is not without gatekeepers or shepherds. They're authorities that determine the dogma, definitions, and dialogue. These individuals indoctrinate, most often with fear as the crook to hook the simple-minded stray sheep. How does the gatekeeper work? Well, what is the message? How are you treated when you disagree? Are you threatened with the loss of something for a different idea? One that you don't force on anyone. A thought that perhaps they simply don't want to discuss or want you to discuss. Are they deeply offended by something like, to give an example, I think the earth is round, or white chocolate is my favorite, but milk chocolate is a close second. Are your leaders always complaining while never offering viable solutions? Are they always first to call names and pass blame after decades of self-service in the same position, while blaming the new person who likes to do things differently for all of their problems, which are all the same old problems? Or do they support others who have been around for decades, who blame everyone else? No, keep your "this describes the other people" bullshit to yourself. I have better things to do than listen to your regurgitation of your own coke-snorting death cult of the apocalypse, and so do you. I want some fucking self-reflection. When you point a finger, 3 more point back at you. You can't change anyone but yourself. You be the change you want to see in the world, and those who want to participate will follow. Just let everyone make up their own minds. Quit trying to control the conversation. Encourage people to seek the truth out for themselves. And you might find out, when you do the same, that you've been wrong the whole time. So then, XV, you must be wondering, why do people join these echo chambers? Why am I a part of them? To answer your question, some are lured by the siren song of stars and statisticians, priests and potentates, the good feels or the guilt, or the good feels when the guilt has been forgiven. But the majority are born into it, brainwashed from a very early, malleable age. In all cases, and out of ignorance, the masses allow the authority figures whom they respect to dictate their thoughts by unconscious consent, because it's easier to give your thoughts away or borrow them from others, so someone else does all the thinking for you. Well, that doesn't happen, you say. Really? Have you ever heard yourself say something like, "Well, says this and I agree"? Why? I don't know. It makes sense. Or maybe, because is a, so has to know what it's talking about. Sound familiar? The herd mentality accepts that it is easier to permit certain others to control, not so much the reality of cause and effect, but the reality in their minds, rather than charting their own mentality through real, rigorous research, observation, experimentation, and experience. This control employs certain weapons, in this case called strawmen. These are name-calling, the call to authority, and the encouragement of emotion-based decision-making, whether it is with fear or the desire for instant gratification, the first of which causes danger and poor mental and physical health, and the second which results in a roller coaster of dissatisfaction that causes the individual a common experience of depression and lack of fulfillment. Human beings are complicated animals, often with simple minds. We each experience life through our own particular prism. Experience shapes opinion, and opinion shapes experience and its interpretation, sometimes our own and sometimes that of others. Because the herd mentality is encouraged in every part of our lives. When we borrow all of our ideas and interpretations, we limit our experience and our ability to learn from it. While experience can offer wisdom, incorrect interpretations of experience cloud judgment. What's more, most people make emotional decisions, then justify them rationally, which more often than not results in errors of judgment. Remember, we are all fallible, yet so often anyone trapped in their own echo chamber will forget and wish only to blame another. I know from experience too many times and understand one must excise rather than exercise their fears to find the truth. Leaders promote boldness, while fear is the message of masters and slaves with projection as their method. There is no one material source for truth, often labeled with fact or a collection of capital letters, claiming to be the leader, the authority, the expert, without any criteria, because they have been around for a while, or they are friends with the right people, or they are saying the right things. These talking heads lie to their consumers, knowing said consumers will forget, outraged by the latest sensationalist headlines. And in the age of social media, we have never been more controlled by our unconscious endorphins than we are today. Why? Their readers, viewers, listeners are stuck in the cognitive dissonance of the echo chamber, and the authorities perceive that their consumers' brainwashing is complete, stuck in the maze, anything but descending the rabbit hole or climbing the mountain. The occupants of the echo chamber will fight the truth or ignore it, and each approach has its own peculiar danger, though the end result is often too similar to matter. They know because someone they trust told them, and because they are angry, while the person who does not trust their pundits cannot know because experience and proof are the antitheses of truth. This is reality when words are violence and silence is violence. But just remember, when that mountain exceeds its carbon footprint, you can linger as long as you wish, as long as you don't mind being part of the new mineral deposit. Or you may find yourself raising a fist, fighting the mountain with all the weapons available to you, which will only result in being crushed by its avalanche. The truth will make you free, but your truth will always get you into trouble. And no, I don't mean that big meanie who calls you names on social media, or those feckless cowards who seek to silence you. These are just another cog, a control mechanism to spread a virus with the sole intent to kill a thought. Not sole intent. Their endgame is to take control over you. But there are two other truths above all else. The first is that while, yes, a few of us really understand nothing, the rest of us really don't understand very much either. We are just one in a house, on a block, on a street, in a city, in a county, in a state, in a country, on a continent, on a planet, in a solar system, in a galaxy, in space, that is part of one big universe of which we know almost nothing about, and yet many are more interested in their own echo chambers than truth, and they think they have all the answers just because they read it in a book or heard someone saying it on the television. And I hope, dear listener, if you are one of those people right now, that you aren't simply thinking about your neighbor and shrugging off your own responsibility, but that you are coming to terms with your own echo chamber, not with guilt or fear or shame, but with humanity and positive attitude to embrace an open mind, unless you really do need the guilt and shame to make it right. We are just here trying to find our way. While we must not always be beyond a little gentle ribbing now and then, be polite to your fellow traveler. We may not be in the same boat, but we are all traveling the same river. There is room enough for everyone if we are compassionate enough to try to understand each other with discernment. And while competition can be healthy, we must also seek harmony. The other great truth is that death is the great equalizer. Life is fleeting, and why try to make it more miserable for others and yourself when you can make the results better? The world you create now is the world you create for your children later. The moral is, slay your illusions before they slay you. But you cannot slay other people's illusions. They have to do it for themselves. But how does one slay their illusions? How can each of us slay our own illusions? After years of being taught what to think rather than how to think, it requires each of us to break our programming and learn how to think. A simple task, but never easy, only achieved by careful consideration, thought, and re-evaluation. Too often, like prison, the echo chamber feels like the life raft. But unlike prison, it will always keep us from our true potential. Once we have learned how to think, we can then learn what to think. How is it one learns to think? The answer is question. Question everything. Anywhere delusion can be hiding, because every human has their own delusion to overcome. Wisdom cannot be gained unless one first asks, but it never ends with one question. Anyone who one day wakes up with the thought that they have arrived have the greatest delusion. Their cup is so small that it can hold no more. The search for truth never ends at all. Remember, the truth is the prize. Remember, we are all on the same road, but we all have our own paths to tread. Boldly explore others' ideas. Boldly explore. Pick them apart, not for others, but for yourself. Reconstruct them, not for others, but for yourself. Keep an open mind until no more holes can be punched through the narrative. Never determine that what is right for you must be right for someone else, because you may discover it was actually never right for you to begin with, and the desire for control over others is part of that delusion. Forcing your will on another who is forcing their will on none, whether it is through physical force or mental manipulation, only creates misery. Consider how each concept might be true in detail. Consider how it might be a lie in detail. Consider both the potential positive and negative motivations. No matter what it is, unless it directly results in force upon those who physically force their will on none or work to intentionally deceive. No matter what it is, reserve judgment until there is no room for doubt. It will require a few years of practice, but the more you do so, the more clear it will become. Little by little, your views will require less re-evaluation. Through this process, treat your neighbor the way you would like to be treated, but also free of assumptions that others will do the same for you. Don't be too harsh with people who have yet to catch up to you. Don't be too harsh to people with whom you have yet to catch up to. It can be very easy to assume it is one when it is in fact the other. Spend more time focusing on what you have in common and expend only enough thoughtful energy on your differences that seem most necessary to address, so as not to wear yourself out or anyone else, because everyone has their limits. After truth has vanquished the chains around your mind, it will facilitate acceptance. This permits healing and peace, the catalysts for harmony and strength, with the scars to remind you of the ignorance you once preferred and lost, and the wisdom that you have gained. Otherwise, you will be broken against the ageless and indomitable mountain that the few know as truth, and upon which the universe is governed. This is an execution of swift vengeance. If you would like to encourage unity with diversity of thought and inspire learning and kindness, like, share, subscribe, and comment. It will help the algorithm and ensure that it is seen by others. If you would like to donate just $1 a month, you can do so through my Patreon page, Subscribestar if you don't like Patreon, or my PayPal, all of which are linked in the description below. May all who listen live abundantly on their new self-created roadmap of reality.